Hi, this is Dr. Atchison, and this is Chapter 3, Consciousness. And this is the first video lecture we're going to do, and this one's going to focus on attention. So, consciousness is our awareness of ourselves and the environment. There really are a lot of evolutionary benefits for this. If you're in a new situation that you've never been in, you need to be aware of yourself and the environment. You need to be able to figure out what to do. You need to be able to pay attention to different things. You need to be able to access information from previous situations and apply it to these novel situations. It's helpful for long-term planning. You need to be able to focus on doing things now that can impact a long-term decision. And allowing consciousness can really help for these long-term plans. Other things that we think about in terms of awareness and consciousness is metacognition. This is thinking about thought, okay? And this will be involved more in self-awareness. But again, it's an important component of these long-term plans. You need to think about what you're going to have to do, thinking about thought, thinking about the different things you need to think about to get this to work. Another thing that and we'll talk about these some more later as well, is theory of mind. Thinking what other people are thinking, thinking about what others are thinking about how other people feel, and having an awareness of that conscious processing of what other people are thinking as well. And again, these can be very helpful in both novel situation and long-term plans. So your book talks about several levels of consciousness, the first of which is minimal consciousness. This is really kind of low-level sensory awareness. You get some inputs about sensations and some output about behavior, but this is really very low level. I kind of like to think about it as when you first wake up in the morning. Yes, I am conscious. Yes, I can feel my child touching me. Yes, I feel that I need to respond to that. But it's very low level. It is not a full consciousness where I really know and am able to report on my mental state. Okay, full consciousness is again when you know about the mental state, you're able to report about it, and you have that level of awareness of yourself and your environment. Self-consciousness is where we kind of turn it inwards. So attention is drawn to the self as an object almost completely. So again, if you think about these three different levels, minimal consciousness is going to be more outward facing. It's going to be more focused on the sensations and the perceptions of the world outside of you as an entity. Full consciousness is going to kind of have the melding of the both of them, and self-consciousness is going to be more inward facing. It's going to be attention is drawn to the self. This is where again that metacognition is going to be taking place in more this self-consciousness. So your mind is really a very complex tool, and it can do more than one thing at one time. We call this dual processing. And this is the idea that information is simultaneously processed on both conscious and unconscious states. Okay? So when I'm driving the car, I can have a full-on conversation with somebody. I can plan a lecture. I can rock out to Hamilton the musical, which I unfortunately do frequently. I can do all of these different things, all while still driving the car. That's because of dual processing. I am focusing my conscious attention on the conversation, on what I'm going to do for lecture, on Hamilton, any of these things where my unconscious attention is really focused on driving. I'm not necessarily thinking about these other things around me that, okay, I need to put this much pressure on the gas pedal and this much pressure on the brake to slow down, and this has become unconscious. So again, we have that dual processing. The two-track mind is a similar idea. It's again this serial processing, so that means we can do it at the same time, of solving problems with focused attention. And we can have this automatic autopilot, this parallel processing, again, taking care of routine activities. I Some of these things are so routine that if you try to think about them and talk about them and how you do them, you can't. I can French braid my daughter's hair, but only if it is unconscious and is on autopilot. I can't do it when I think about it. There have been times that I've like, hey, Bryn, we need to sing a song when I braid your hair so that I can do it. Because when I'm thinking about which hair goes where, I can't do it. Again, those are those differences in levels of processing, okay? This two-track mind, this idea that we can be doing two things at one time, this dual processing, and that they can be split into the conscious and the unconscious. And there's another picture. So you're brushing your teeth. You're not necessarily thinking about brushing your teeth. You are thinking about something else, but still managing to brush all your teeth. Okay, paying attention. So for this, on this level of conscious attention, where we're consciously paying attention to something, what we're doing is selective attention. We are paying attention to one thing. We are selecting what we are going to pay attention. We're focusing that conscious awareness on a particular stimulus. Hopefully, you are focusing your conscious awareness on this video lecture as that particular stimulus. And hopefully you're not doing this on autopilot while you're thinking about something else. If you are, that's okay. You can pause it and rewind it and go back. But again, this can happen. I know that sometimes when I read a textbook, especially some of these dry textbooks, my brain does that. I will consciously, I will have a two-track mind problem. And I will be reading, all the words are going into my head, but I'm not paying attention to any of them. I am consciously thinking about something else. So my selective attention isn't on the textbook where it should have been. One good example of this is the cocktail party effect. What you select to pay attention to. So if you're at a party and there's a lot of people talking, there's a lot of noise, this can even be in a noisy restaurant, you are focusing your selective attention on that one person that you're talking to or that group of people that you're talking to and ignoring all that other things around you. All that other stuff around you is going into your unconscious processing, not your conscious processing. So what happens when you're having this conversation with this group of people and you hear your name across the room? What tells you that you have dual processing, what tells you that you have a two-track mind, is the fact that while you are listening and you are paying your selective attention to this conversation that you were having, your unconscious attention detected your name and it pulled your selective attention. There's examples of this. We have examples of selective inattention, where because we're paying attention, we're focusing our attention on that one thing, we're missing something else. So missing the elephant in the room, okay? That is a phrase about selective inattention. Because we're focused our selective attention on one thing, we miss the fact that there's an elephant in the room. So again, this is that idea of selective inattention. One way we can see this is inattentional blindness. This is the failure to see visual objects when attention is directed elsewhere. This is literally the elephant in the room. Okay, that's literally what inattentional blindness is talking about. We can have inattentional deafness too, where we're not hearing something because we're focusing on something else. That can happen too. Another example of this selective inattention is change blindness. This is where we fail to notice changes in the environment because of where our selective attention is focused. So there's some really great videos about these that I would like you to watch. There's this one on inattentional blindness, where it's the basketball video, and the link is there, but it's also on both D2L and on the YouTube playlist. To watch this video, watch the change blindness video. These are really, really great videos that talk about these things. In fact, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause, go watch those two, and then come back and finish the lecture. Okay, let's say that you did this, that you paused and you went and watched those videos. What's really great is because your selective attention here was on counting the number of basketball tosses, you probably missed the gorilla that walked across the thing. Again, this is an inattentional blindness. Because you're selectively attending to the basketball tosses, you are blind to, in this case, the gorilla in the room. You were inattentionally blind because your selective attention was focused elsewhere. In this video, change blindness. What's really interesting about this is the person could completely change and they didn't notice at all. What's interesting about the findings of this study is actually relevant to some social psychology as well that we'll talk about later on in the course, whereas people were less likely to notice the change in the person when there was a difference in status. So when a professor was answering the questions and it was a seeming student that was asking the questions, the professor didn't notice that the students changed. Or if it was a student asking giving the answers and it was a professor change, they didn't seem to notice because there was a difference in status. It wasn't, oh, I need to know your face, you might be useful to me. Whereas if it was a presumed student answering another presumed student's question, they were more likely to notice the change in the individual. So that's a little bit into some social psychology. But again, this change blindness, the person changed and he didn't even notice. It's one of my favorite videos. Selective attention and accidents. So as I said, I often am driving and I'm often, thinking about other things and maybe listening to music, thinking about lectures, having a conversation, these sorts of things. The problem is that we really are not great at multitasking. And especially when physical things are involved, okay? So 28% of traffic accidents are caused by either talking or texting on phones. What's interesting is that this is not the same as talking to somebody in the car. If you're talking to somebody in the car, you are less likely to get into a car accident than you're talking to somebody on the phone. So this is not all conversations are created equal. There is something about that phone use, even with Bluetooth device, even with hands-free devices, that this selective attention to that thing that we're focusing on and leaving driving on that unconscious is a problem. It's harder for us to switch back. It's harder for us to switch back when that car does cut you off, when we have these other tools involved. Cell phones actually create a comparable risk to drunk driving. And so we see that the risks that drunk driving and texting while driving are very, very similar, and we have similar kinds of risks for driving. I love this comic. I have to hang up now. I'm crashing. We are not as great at multitasking as we think we are. And again, these risks are equal for hands-free devices. So that kind of wraps up our information on attention for our consciousness chapter. There is another video lecture that I would like you to watch, and it will focus on sleep. Thanks. See you in class.